Hi, welcome to a new information pill of the channel Wikiscadi. Today's topic is a bit different as, with the help of our partners at Corporate Solutions, we're currently adding new training and services in English and a new line of courses on financing projects with international development institutions, focusing mostly on small and medium-sized firms and other organizations such as technology centers, consortia, and clusters. Today, I'd like to introduce Julio Fuster, who is a well-known expert in this field, both in Spain and in these institutions. He has worked with multinational firms and his own consulting firm, Corporate Solutions, based in Madrid, in over 90 countries, and for 10 of these agencies, development banks, bilateral cooperation aid agencies, and funds. Julio will lead today's presentation on the topic of how to finance privately led or managed projects. Or, to be more precise, how to co-finance them, as rarely these international development institutions take on the major share of a private-led financing project. So, Julio, all yours.
Thank you, Estrella, and welcome to everyone listening to us. I'm very happy to introduce this little topic about financing small and medium projects. Probably many of you think that this is project finance. Actually, project finance is usually meant to be the larger projects that are directly financed through the cash flow generated by the project. In this case, we're talking about medium-sized projects from 1 to 10 million, half a million, which are requested to be co-financed. Okay, so let's call it financing projects rather than project finance. Sometimes they will be private-public, but neither we will use the word PPP or public-private partnerships, because again, that refers normally to large infrastructure projects that generate a sufficient cash flow. So that's the scope of today's video. Which institutions are the ones financing where we can ask for financing in these projects? Well, actually all the multilateral institutions, from UN agencies, some of them, not all, to the multilateral banks, World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and others that are in other videos, right, Estrella, of Wikiscadi?
Correct. You can actually find more information on these development institutions on these other videos.
Thanks. So in all of these institutions, there's either a subsidiary or a private sector window or facility, or there is a department that finances small projects. Frequently, in the World Bank, for example, there's a whole unit called International Finance Corporation, which generally does medium to large projects. But the World Bank itself, in its loans given to governments, frequently has a lot of projects inside the loan. For example, one of my first projects was in Honduras in a loan bank for the World Bank, and I financed a project to create technology centers there. I managed it for 3 or 4 years, and it was a traditional loan. Of course, I knew the beneficiary, and it was a procurement. So you will see, and later we'll talk about how project financing and procurement are related and the differences. Other institutions besides the multilateral banks that finance projects, and sometimes it's easier, although they're not so well known, are the bilateral aid agencies and the multiple funds that exist today for sector or financing specific areas like Africa, or vaccines like now with COVID, or other things that are very specific, children, education. There's thousands, I would say, of development funds today which are specialized, and most companies, especially small and medium ones, do not know or do not dare even approach them. So it's a very large market, but it's also very diversified and diluted. So let's concentrate on what's more interesting for a small, medium enterprise. To start with, I have to say that these institutions are very approachable in that most of them have some window or website or unit that will describe how you can request, either you as a private firm or a beneficiary, whether it's a private or a public beneficiary, can approach. So there's actually two ways to approach this. You can do it directly, like for the IFC, or BidInvest in Latin America, or there's a private sector window in EBRD in London, EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, etc. Or you can go to the beneficiary and through them, whether it's a government agency or a business association or a cluster, you can say, why don't you ask for this project and I will manage it for you. Now comes the tricky part. Sometimes the beneficiary will do that and the institution will like the project and approve it, but then, boom, they said, oh, we have to procure this if it's a private firm. We cannot award a project to a private firm, so we have to do a management contract, a procurement, okay, a procurement notice. So they will launch one or more procurement notices, for example, for construction or works, supplies, or technical assistance, or all of them together in a turnkey project. Now comes the risk. If this happens, and it's happened to me in like 50% of the cases where I was requesting project financing, they form a short list, they have to, right? And then they will maybe award it to some other firm that's more powerful or that has more lobby with the company or more presence in the country. Estrella, how frequent have you seen in your procurement, scanning and so on, these kind of management contracts or procurements for actually running a project as a private sector institution?
Actually, it's not that common. From my experience, usually our core business deals more with the procurement procedures, so it's not as common as what you are talking about.
Yeah,
really.
But these procurement procedures sometimes will include a management contract, which is a procurement itself. For example, I design a center in Cameroon for an agro-industrial center for UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organizations based in Vienna, and then it was awarded to a French firm for a management contract for 3 years. The French firm actually wanted to do this business, to create a unit there and use this as a beachhead, as a part of landing in Cameroon for 3 years, and then they set up their own unit. So actually, it is an instrument of internationalization. I can give a lot of examples. The Romania one that I gave before was with a UK company, United Kingdom company in consortium with us. They then started in Romania a subsidiary to do incubators. It was managing and setting up 6 business incubators. And I have multiple examples. The most recent one, for example, in Morocco with one of these bilateral agencies, the German GIZ. Okay, I won't say it in German because my accent is not good in that language. Gemeinschaft für Zusammenarbeit. But the issue is that it was to run an agro-industrial center. It was bid out, and the awarded company, which is French, not German, so again, it's untied aid. You don't have to be of the nationality in most of these institutions that is funding the project, is running it for 3 years, and like that, they already will have a presence in that country. So again, a way to internationalize. Let's go a little bit to the procedures now and forms. I think it can be scary to say, oh my God, in these big institutions, how can I ask for a little project? I want to do an agricultural irrigation or hydroponics terrace-based system. Well, actually, it's not scary. Most of them have a 2-stage, similar to procurement, a 2-stage award. You first present a concept paper, project concept, it's got many names, or a preliminary project. And then after a review by the institution and or the beneficiary or agency supervising it, then they will ask you for a full business plan. Sometimes it's a feasibility plan, sometimes it's both, sometimes it's just a full project plan, okay, whatever the name given to the institution. And that requires, of course, a substantial amount of work. The issue is that in many cases, again, in more than 50% of the cases, we have been able to obtain project preparation facilities, a small consulting assignment to carry out that feasibility plan from the same institution. The institution knows that you're not ready, so they will say, okay, so let's do a short list of 3, and you will win to carry out the feasibility plan. Or even better, somebody else will do it so it's independent, and then the company will do it. Have you found this to be frequent, to have tenders to carry out feasibility and business plans in your procurement activity?
Yes, most definitely. Maybe not as often as you encounter, but yeah, for sure. You know, our core business is the UN procurement system, and all their agencies basically they publish tenders relating to feasibility projects for all kinds of
projects, right.
Whatever.
Actually, my first 4 last projects have been with UNDP in doing project preparation. UNDP has traditionally not been very active in funding these, let's call them pilot projects or feasibility plans. And recently they have found out that if they're going to expand, and as you know, UNDP is one of the largest agencies. For example, the same thing happens with other agencies like FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization in Italy. They are also running projects, and I would continue with all the UN agencies and say that they have gotten into the business of feasibility and preparation, something that the banks have always done, because you cannot do a project financing without a feasibility and a business plan. So to finalize, there are these windows. Sometimes they're very transparent. They're in the website. Sometimes they're a little bit more complicated. You have to go through the beneficiary. The requirements are not very different from procurement. It's generally just a short document. Sometimes the institution requires a specific format, like IFC. You have to fill in their format. My GIZ project in Morocco was in a specific format in both phases. If you didn't fill it in those formats, you were not awarded the project, okay? So, and some other times they just tell you, just send me a good feasibility plan in your own method or with whoever, consultant or internal department format. So it will vary. Of course, we will go deeper into this in other videos. And just to finalize, I really think that this is very feasible for small and medium-sized firms. You will need a little bit of knowledge of these private sector windows. You will need to understand how this small project financing or small and medium-sized project financing is different from procurement notices, both works and the others. But there's a lot of similarities. I would say that about 80% is already there for those who have done a procurement contract. For those who come from banking and project finance, actually they have a more difficult time, downscaling to these kind of projects, because project finance requires big, heavy analysis. They require big banks and syndicates and all kinds of institutions, and that's not what I'm talking about here. We will talk maybe in other videos about big project finance and PPP and working with banks and financial institutions. Here, you either do it with your own money and the institution's money. There may be a third party. There may be a bank or a non-financial institution, but it's not going to be a very big financial consortium or syndicate. So we're not really talking about deep finance. We're talking about a technical and some financial knowledge.
Actually, we're hoping, with your help, of course, to go deeper into this topic and other topics related to project financing with other development institutions, such as multilateral banks, such as you said, European, African, Asian, but of
bilateral
course,
and funds.
And yes, and agencies, bilateral agencies, which are a totally different world. But I think some of the experience one can gain from this project financing project, from this financing project in multilateral banks can be actually used.
Yes.
Into other projects with bilateral agencies.
Let's not forget that bilateral agencies are 2 types. The non-financial ones, like GIZ, but all countries have what we call a development finance institution, which is a bank or a banking kind of institution that actually lends or gives equity. In Spain, we have Cofides. In France, they have Proparco. And in Germany, they have a gigantic bank called KfW. Okay, and these bigger financing for a bit larger projects or for providing equity. So the mix of the bilateral agencies and these development finance institutions are a big market for small and medium-sized financing.
So thanks a lot, Julio, for this introduction on a complex topic and the fairly unknown role and instruments of the international development institutions. I'd like to wrap this up with a bit of a peek into an upcoming course which will be offered shortly on our Wikiscadi platform, delivered by Julio again, and with my colleague,
together with you,
and my colleague Juan López de Zarde, and myself as a bit of a sidekick. Our platform will offer both a basic and an advanced course on project financing with international institutions, aimed mostly at small and medium companies and non-for-profit business organizations. We will also add a few short learning pills on the topic, focusing on specific sectors, institutions, and funds. Thanks for your attention, and we'll see you on our next information pill on the Wikiscadi channel.